Never Finished by David Goggins. I am so excited for this. I know a lot of you guys are. Now, before I start, I want to dispel something. Maybe take a little bit of beef and give it a little squash, if you know what I'm saying. So about a month ago or so, I made a video about this book. In this video, basically all I talked about was what there is to expect from this book and what we know about it, which I think is fair. Now, some of you mentioned in the comments that I did not bring up an almost literally major detail. So out of respect and honor, I would like to begin this by taking a second to say thank you to David Goggins for his service in the Navy. As I always say to the veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces, in person, our country would not exist without the courage of you and your peers. Please take a second to just honor, respect, admire, and thank the people who risk or risked their lives every day to protect America or your country in the comments below. How is this book, totally different turn here, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. How is this compared to his other book, Can't Hurt Me? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it ghost-written? His last one was, and some people actually did not buy it for that reason. Now, my thoughts on ghostwriting is a complete other video topic, but this one was not ghostwritten. But in this review, I'm going to talk about my thoughts on Never Finished, things I learned, things I liked, anything I wasn't too crazy about, and more. I'm also going to go over standout quotes, who I recommend this book to, and what books to maybe check out next. Just so you guys know, there are affiliate links in the description, and if you buy anything through those links, then I get commission, which helps me build this channel and keep making these videos. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam, and I want to make self-growth normal, because people shouldn't have to look this information up. It should just be mainstream knowledge. If you agree, then please make sure to smash that like button. Chapter 1 is Maximize Minimal Potential. This talked about like the demons that his father, Trutus, put on him, and who Goggins became in spite of Trutus's ugliness. Trutus is dead, by the way. He was the type of guy to drink like a fifth of scotch and smoke 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes daily. Now, I did mention in my previous video about this book that the audio version has 3 hours of bonus content. All of this video just about was pre-written, and in retrospect, I think I spent a lot more time than I thought I was going to discussing the impact of that 3 hours on my thoughts on this whole book. So I guess my apologies to anything that separates that from the experience of actually reading the book. But anyone who has listened to the audio version of this book and read it, please let me know if you disagree or if your experience has been different in the comments below. Something that disappointed me again with this audiobook after his other is that this one is also not narrated by David Goggins. The thing with David Goggins is, there are a lot of things, but he has a deep and husky, sort of throaty voice that many people have come to love about him. So to get this massive feature without him narrating the majority, at least, of the book for a second book in a row, it's a pretty sizable downfall. And I'm sure negative reviews are probably gonna highlight that. The 3 hours of bonus content, I have to add, it's pretty interestingly laid out, and about half of it directly includes him and his voice. Chapter 2 is called Merry Christmas. Goggins just hates the idea of a regular audiobook. Can't Hurt Me was what I believe was like, he referred to as an audiobook podcast talk show thing, where he and the ghostwriter, who's also narrating in this one, by the way, this guy, he doesn't have a bad voice, but like, I actually think he has a pretty decent voice for narrating audiobooks. He does a pretty good job, but this type of content, it begs for David Goggins' voice. Like, I swear that it was a mistake not having him narrate his own book. A second book in a row. Really? But he and the ghostwriter of the previous book, they, in between chapters, they have these like brief conversations discussing retrospective questions about like what happened in the chapter, and it's really, really interesting to hear what Goggins has to say looking back. I think that adds a lot of depth and cohesiveness to the audiobook and the experience as a listener. He mentioned multiple times in the second chapter, like getting distracted by injury and getting stuck in concrete. Not literally, but someone said in a comment once that Goggins is like a stoic who became a stoic without realizing it. And I thought of this when he explained that you shouldn't ignore pain, but you shouldn't let it affect you for that long. A lot of us are trapped in our own brains, shackled by long gone demons who might even be dead. We refuse to discuss or acknowledge what happened, so when we overcome it all, we fail to recognize or even feel it. Chapter 3 is the mental lab. This was something that Audible really seemed to hype up in its own description. The actual chapters don't really take up all that much of this, but the reason that I'm so shaken about this whole audio version as a reviewer is how unusual it is. I've reviewed almost 300 books on this channel, and how much of it disrupts the traditional book's chapter by chapter grind. And something that I think is unfortunate is I don't know how much of this exactly is applicable to the actual book, but there's the chapter, and then there's a podcast conversation about the chapter, and then what they call an evolution, which might be in the book. I should probably look that up and then put that in the comments or something. And the evolution tells an applicable story about how Goggins broke through to another side of the turmoil he underwent in his life, and how it kind of applies to our lives. And then there's another podcast conversation reflecting on the evolution, and that's basically each chapter. Okay, I've talked way too much about the formatting of this book. Let's just go back to the straight up content. If you are not familiar with Goggins, please know that he curses more than almost anyone, and he is an incredibly hard-hitting truth teller. It's not the type, however, of cursing that I would at least find borderline annoying because of how viscerally used it is, but it's rather more expressive and descriptive, which I really admire. But in chapter 3, he discussed even how his life was like, how it changed after releasing Can't Hurt Me, and how he adapted to the changes in his mental lab. The book, by the way, ended up selling 2.5+ million copies, which is pretty impressive for 4 years for someone with an otherwise blank bibliography. Chapter 4, A Savage Reborn. What he said about like David Goggins versus Goggins and the whole alter ego and transforming yourself from one side into another in order to bring more of yourself out, that is savage, and I really hate that word, savage. I think at this point in like the evolution of society, savage, I don't even know if it was originally an adjective, but it is a beyond beaten to death adjective that still kind of needs to be used to describe this. But to me, the best parts of the book are when he breaks away from his own story to reflect on what he's learned. We all take that kind of hit once in a while, but those who tend to crane their necks looking for the crest of the mountain as they beg for their suffering to end are the ones who get smashed the most by any false summit. We have to stop looking for a sign that the hard time will end. When the distance is unknown, it is even more critical that you stay locked in so that the unknown factor doesn't steal your focus. The end will come when it comes, and anticipation will only distract you from completing the task in front of you to the best of your ability. The fourth evolution was brutal, about some of the horrific things that Trudas put his mom through. In the audio version for the following podcast, Goggins actually straight up interviews his mom, and she talks more about like how they ended up together and what was going on in her life, her time in prison, etc. Anyone who's been in a very like emotionally and especially physically abusive, maybe romantic relationship, I would consider this whole section of the book to be a little bit of a trigger warning, but you do get an interesting insight here, whether that's the case or otherwise, into what an abusive relationship does to a person, especially over time. She lived with that for 17 years, and I get goosebumps just thinking about what that was like. The conversation was incredibly illuminating, and it really started to occur to me, listening to it, how amazing of a job they did on this audio version, like sonically speaking. I really don't remember the last time I spent so much of a review discussing the audiobook as opposed to just the book. But this one really separates itself, not just because of what makes him different as an author and figure, but the fact that over 25% of it is not in the actual book, and it's made specifically for a listening experience. Chapter 5 is Disciple of Discipline. So this is where he talks about his experience with his grandfather, who didn't even like being called Grandpa or Gramps or anything like that. He only answered to Sergeant Jack. He sounded like a total hard ass, and I definitely found it believable that he's related to David Goggins. His time with Sergeant Jack taught him some very valuable life lessons in diligence, discipline, and overall mental endurance. I swear, it really like hits us when we're older, like why our grandparents or parents or other members of our family did what they did for us. When we're younger, it's like we really don't understand. It's like, why are they doing this? Why are they making us do this? This is stupid. But like when you're older, it's like it really, certain moments, dude, they really like hit you. Speaking of being hit, chapter 6, The Art of Getting Hit in the Mouth. Something else I like about this book is that unlike other memoirs, the author does not get lost in describing like total nuances in his craft that are really just unnecessary to understanding their magnitude in the context of whatever is happening. In other words, when he's telling a story about ultramarathon running, he's not giving us like all these crazy details that don't really make that much sense to people who are not ultramarathon runners, when those details aren't really that necessary to getting his point across. I don't know whether this was intentional. The name of this chapter reminds me of something I once heard Gary Vee say. You know why you people in your 20s feel like you're on top of the world? It's because none of you have been punched in the mouth. I don't know why they call it that. They could call it like kicked in the shin or smacked in the balls or something, but the importance of the concept of getting punched in the mouth seems to have taken quite a storm over the last several years, I suppose. Chapter 7 is The Reckoning. Here's the part that really stood out from this chapter, where he ran 240 miles with a torn ACL. And by the way, when I show you guys these like little excerpts and stuff, that I hope to emphasize Goggins' raw and inspiring way of thinking after being called the N-word flat out by a young white boy rolling up next to him in a pickup truck while he was running across the state of Florida. I am focused on being my best at all times. When you live that way, there is no time to donate to small town racists or anyone else whose perspective is defined by their narrow minds. At this point in my life, the supposedly offensive, unspeakable word with its dark, violent history has been reduced to a chain of harmless symbols, consonants, and vowels that don't mean a damn thing. Goggins had a 10-day experience under a guy named Captain Connolly, and when he described how he felt after the experience ended, it ultimately occurred to me, and this was kind of like the icing on the cake, seriously, that Goggins is very aware and humble enough to be like, damn, like anyone else, like I'm resting on my laurels. And this adds a very refreshing level of relatability, I found, to Never Finished. This is written by a guy who has the ultimate goal to be the hardest person on the planet, whatever exactly that means. But overall, like, damn, seriously, this is easily better than Can't Hurt Me. I think as a non-fiction book, it was like a fusion of both memoir and how-to in terms of unwrinkling your mindset. And you don't see that fusion all that often, at least done as clearly, I think, as David Goggins did on Never Finished. Definitely a contender for best of the year list. Definitely. Quotes. Numbness was how I coped with the fact that losing was all I ever knew. The more I heard about my own success, the more tempting it became to coast as if I finally arrived. It's not about 110 hours, it's what happens in that 110 hours. I'm not crazy, I'm just not you. Hey, I know what we're all capable of when we are willing to think unreasonably and push past the point where almost everyone else would beg to stop. Life is the greatest competitor of all time. Direction 1. I recommend this book for anyone who getting lazy, whether they know it or not. Direction 2. If you like this book and you haven't checked out Can't Hurt Me, you gotta go check that thing out right now. Seriously. Also, Relentless and Winning by Tim Grover are excellent add-ons. And if you're feeling on a little on the cerebral side of things, maybe a little bit of Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday, that might be in your future as well. Never Finished by David Goggins. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video, if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. This is probably going to be one of the longest book reviews I've done in a while, but if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification whenever I drop new videos, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere, and we'll see you then.